Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we're looking at something that is literally rewiring how we think about digital ownership. We're diving into the Codatta Protocol, specifically focusing on its data lineage and lifecycle dynamics. If you've ever wondered how raw, seemingly invisible data actually transforms into a transparent, tracked, and genuinely monetized asset on the blockchain, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to break down exactly how this protocol creates a permanent, immutable record of your contributions. Let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be exploring the Codatta Protocol across 4 distinct stages. Stage 1 is Assetification. Stage 2 is data assembling. Stage 3 covers publication and adoption. And finally, Stage 4 is all about the financial payouts. But before we jump into the mechanics of all that, let's stop and really think about this for a second. Where does your data actually go? In today's AI-driven world, data collection is incredibly opaque. You submit a sample, maybe you label an image or give some feedback, and poof, it just vanishes into a black box. You have no idea if it was used, where it went, or how much value it generated. Well, the Codatta Protocol tackles this exact problem head-on. It provides an immutable, completely transparent visualization of data lineage from the literal second it's created. To really wrap our heads around this, let's briefly track a hypothetical atomic data contribution, say, a single image label, through these 4 sequential stages. It's kind of like a manufacturing assembly line. Stage 1 is like sourcing your raw materials and making sure they're top quality. Stage 2, that's assembling those raw materials to actually build the car. Stage 3 is selling that car, getting it out on the road. And Stage 4 is taking the profits from that sale and perfectly distributing them back to the shareholders. It's essentially a seamless end-to-end assembly line for data value. All right, let's kick things off with Stage 1, Assetification. This stage right here is the foundational genesis of the entire system. It's where your raw, everyday data submissions are fundamentally transformed into trusted, immutable assets. Let's walk through these 3 critical microactions. So, it all kicks off with submission, where contributors provide their data samples along with the relevant metadata. But Codatta doesn't just accept everything willy-nilly. Step 2 is a rigorous screening and validation process. This involves automatic pre-scan checks, stuff like heuristic formatting, policy compliance, and deduplication. It even uses AI agents for semantic checks, and if necessary, it triggers a human review. Now, this is absolutely crucial. Any submissions that fail at this step are immediately rejected. They never move forward. Period. But for the data that does pass, we hit Step 3, CF's creation and anchoring. This brilliantly illustrates the exact mechanism that guarantees you actually get credit for your specific atomic contribution. CF stands for Contribution Fingerprint. When your accepted data becomes a CF, it turns into a signed record that locks in a unique digital fingerprint of your content. It attaches evidence, and most importantly, it permanently binds your identity as the contributor to that data asset. Basically, it's your permanent digital signature on that tiny piece of the AI puzzle. And once that contribution fingerprint is created, the system doesn't just shove it onto some private, centralized server. No way. Its fingerprint is anchored directly on-chain. This can happen individually, per CF, or they can be grouped together in a secure cryptographic batch, known as a Merkle root, on the selected network. This anchoring step is the magic moment that cements your data status as an immutable, unchangeable asset. The genesis of your data is now mathematically proven and entirely publicly verifiable. Which brings us to Stage 2, data assembling. So we're transitioning from gathering those verified raw materials to the actual assembly of the finished product. To understand this, we need to contrast 2 concepts. On one side, we have our tiny, individual atomic assets from Stage 1. On the other side, we have versioned assemblies. In Stage 2, those individual anchored assets are curated and combined to form massive, comprehensive datasets, things you might call, say, training set v1.0. Going back to our analogy, this is where we take all those raw materials and assemble the actual car. But here is the absolute genius of the Codatta Protocol. Grouping these assets together into a massive assembly does absolutely nothing to alter the underlying provenance of the original contributions. Your individual contribution fingerprint, it remains entirely intact and traceable, even when it's mixed into a giant pool of millions of other assets. Moving right along, let's look at Stage 3, publication and adoption. Now that we've got our curated dataset, we need to track the downstream reach of that data. This is where those versioned assemblies are released out into the real world to actually do something useful, selling the car and putting it out on the road. There are a few key downstream pathways here. The dataset might be published to a major repository like Hugging Face, or maybe it's pushed out to decentralized storage. But the absolute most important pathway is when the dataset is adopted by a specific AI model, let's just call it Model X, for its training phase. This adoption event is actively tracked by the Lineage graph, and it serves as the ultimate proof of utility for the dataset. The data isn't just sitting around collecting digital dust, it's actively powering the next generation of AI.
And that leads us to the grand finale, stage 4, financial payouts.
This is the moment where that entire economic loop finally closes. All of that transparency and tracking from the previous stages, this is where it pays off. When an adoption event from stage 3 actually generates revenue, like a commercial licensing fee being paid by the creators of Model X, it triggers a payout event in the protocol. Now, to understand how these payouts work, we need to quickly define a term, backers. As we noted, the original ownership of the data belongs to the submitters, the validators, and the initial stakers. However, this system allows for fractional ownership, and that ownership is tradable. That means the current holder receiving the payout might actually be different from the original data creator. The Lineage view identifies these current owners as backers. They're basically investors or entities who have acquired ownership rights on the open market. So when that licensing fee actually hits, a connection is drawn from the payout node straight back to the original anchored assets. Notice how the value is sliced up. It's perfectly distributed between the original contributors who held on to their rights, the validators and stakers who secured the network, and the backers who acquired rights on the open market. Back to our manufacturing analogy, this is taking the profits from the car sale and perfectly distributing them to the shareholders. The Codatta system ensures that the funds flow seamlessly and directly into the exact digital wallets currently holding the asset fraction. No middlemen, no opaque accounting, just a direct mathematical distribution of value based on completely immutable lineage. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Look at the core question we're tackling here. Who truly captures the value of your data in an AI-driven economy? For a long time, the answer was just massive tech corporations who aggregated your data in secret. But by mapping the exact lifecycle from a raw validated asset to a curated assembly to model adoption and straight through to your digital wallet, the Codatta Protocol offers a radically different answer. It proves that with transparent data lineage, the creators, the validators, and the backers can directly capture the value they actually generate. I highly encourage you to keep exploring how immutable provenance is going to completely rethink the entire data economy. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.